Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today we have 5 first impressions reviews for you. We're going to be going through these 5 games, timestamps to everything down below, and I'll be giving you my brief thoughts on these games. And we're going to start off with Cosca, no particular order here, literally just what's closest to me, so we're going to start with this one. This is from Tlama Games, it's an interesting sort of worker placement, but not really. It's more dice placement, but dice that you completely control yourself. The general idea is this is a mafia-themed game, and you're trying to curry favor with the various gang members in order to both improve the in-game tableau, but also because that's ultimately how you win, by having the most favor with the most gang members. And to that end, across the 7 days of play, there's 7 rounds, each round is a day. There's a nice little thematic element where you start the game off on the day that you're playing, and then you play a full week from there. But in each of these rounds, you're basically going to be taking your dice and setting them behind a screen in order to decide what those dice are going to do. And there are 6 locations in the game just telling you what the dice faces do, whether you want to earn money or guns or trade this for that or go betting at the races. There's all these things you can do, and you're setting these dice behind your screen. The trick is, though, that you're looking at the various gang members who are currently in play, and you're trying to curry favor with them. And to that end, you're trying to align your dice and or the things you get with your dice in order to curry their favor. One gang member might want certain dice faces on your dice, and again, you have complete control over this. It's not random, you just choose it as you want, but you're trying to balance multiple objectives. Because that other gang member might want you to have the most money, which means you have to go there, you have to go to the bank to go ahead and get the most money in order to fulfill that objective. And by winning the favor of these gang members, they're going to potentially give you extra dice depending on if they work that day of the week. Each gang member has like a little slide of the days of the week that they're active in. The general idea of the game works fine. Overall, across 7 rounds of play, you are setting dice faces, trying to slowly improve your own tableau while trying to ensure that you are the person who has the most favor with the most gang members at the end of those 7 days. Where Cosca falls short for me is that nothing really exciting ever happens. It's very much just choose your own dice, resolve what you go for, balance what you think is best as well as what you think other players are going to go for. There's an aspect of fighting for the favor of a gang member if you both earn that favor otherwise, but nothing truly exciting happens in the game. It's a slow degree of building up your tableau and then trying to see who won at the end of it. It checks all the boxes but doesn't particularly excite. This is a 3 out of 5 for me. Moving on to there, we have Nestlings. Nestlings has a bit of a similar problem for me. The general idea of this game is you are trying to set your dice. Well, not really, this time you're not setting your dice, you're rolling your dice, and you're using your dice in order to go to various locations on the board to claim the various food bits in order to feed your nestlings while also trying to build up your own tableau. Again, a little similar to what Cosca's doing, but also very different at the same time. But the general idea is you are trying to go to various spots on this board, a board that is unnecessarily too big, by the way. There's not like you have this giant board that barely matters. It could have been like a little nothing, but you know, fits in the box, I guess. But you have this large board, you have these the locations where the food is, and you're trying to get that food by placing your dice there either first or having the most in any given location. At the end of the day, like I said, you are trying to feed your nestlings, and then you have this little dial of tokens that you're trying to fill up in order to get as many points as possible as you play through it. There's a few more things going on to the game. That's the basic idea of what's happening, and it ultimately comes down to kind of just feeling like you're trying to just get things in order to fill up your board without there feeling like there were interesting decisions along the way. There's some minor dice mitigation, there's some small choices, but then again, the dice mitigation is effectively giving up points. So for me, whenever you have a game that requires the luck of the dice, but then gives you dice mitigation that ultimately is, hey, we allowed you to change your bad rolls, but at the cost of a penalty, that to me is just minorly different than the fact that you might just get bad rolls to begin with. To me, a good dice placement game is very much about interesting decisions about where you place your dice and not really being as victim to bad rolls, or at least not as frequently. Don't get me wrong, I don't super feel like I'm victim to bad rolls in Nestlings. I just don't feel, similar to what I said with Cosca, I don't feel there's anything super interesting happening. It's a little bit satisfying to get an escalating amount of points as you slowly build out your wheel and earn more and more bonus for completing it, but at the end of the day, I just didn't feel the decisions I was doing was interesting. The reward is possibly a little better than Cosca, but the decision space is possibly a little worse, leading to Nestlings being a 2.5 out of 5 for me. Ultimately, there's nothing wrong with the experience, but I think there are so many excellent, great games that the decision space felt very minimal to me. The best part with the game was it is fun to earn points, so even though there's very little decisions, having your actual points gained is nice. But outside of that, I just wasn't really too impressed with what Nestlings is doing. From there, we're going to go ahead and let's just finish boxes on this side, I guess. Let's go ahead and move to Perch. Perch is from Inside Up, one of their newest games, and this one is basically area control with birds. You have these birds that you're placing down onto various locations in order to get benefit from the awards on those locations, and then trying to move those birds over to fountains, or more specifically, there's a central fountain board that you're scoring, and depending on the locations you place your birds, you might be able to move your birds over to score on the fountain. Now, you're trying to juggle a lot of different things, but there is a degree of trying to get the tallest stack on each location, or more specifically, it's actually not always about the tallest stack, rather each location has a metric of scoring for first, second, and third and all that, and sometimes the tallest stack will be first, but other times it's not, and so there's a weird little puzzle of where you're trying to score points, the abilities you're trying to get, and how you're trying to be mindful of the in-game abilities. Oh yes, there's animals. Did I mention that there's animals in some of these locations? And you can gain control of these animals utilizing them for their abilities if you gain control of the location. But you're trying to juggle all of these locations as well as the fountain at the end of it while trying to build up larger and larger stacks of birds on these locations. There's cute little other things like shocking birds into the fountains and covering your birds and having nests that add a level to your bird. There's all these other little cute things going on, but ultimately it is an area control game that is mostly pretty straightforward. Sometimes there's opportunities to be mean. There's elements where if you have the same number of birds for a location, it just cancels each other out and no one gets those rewards. So if you've played games like Las Vegas, it has that element of you really kind of want to go for it or just back off entirely, because otherwise you two are going to be fighting and I'll walk away earning points because I just went other places and or was fine going for a very comfortable third place that ended up being first place just because of the way you guys were fighting with each other. Overall, Perch is fine. It does a decent job as giving you a lot more decision space, like compared to like Cosca and Nestlings, it's giving you more decision space to work with and more interesting decisions based on the locations and or the assortment of locations and or animals that are going to be in play every game. It does have that fun aspect that I do enjoy in Las Vegas, where there's an element of trying to figure out where to push your battles, but while it is overall fine, again, I didn't get that amazing aspect from it. I didn't feel like there were amazing, incredible turns or anything phenomenal happening. It felt like a fairly straightforward, area control, pushing the other players, trying to take advantage of the locations. It's good, and also I would say it probably doesn't help that I'm not particularly pulled in by the theme of the game either. Like the structure, like it's cute, but I don't know, it's fine. It's better than the other two for me. This is a 3.5 out of 5, but again, in a world full of amazing area control games, this one felt like it was decent. It was pretty decent. Perch is pretty decent, a 3.5 out of 5. From there we move on to Brass Empire. Brass Empire is coming to you from Rock Manor Games, and this is a deck building game. A deck building game that actually tries to be doing something a bit different than other deck building games, in the sense that it seems to be trying to combine building up your own personal tableau, like you might do in a game like Dominion, combined with the more confrontational nature of a game like you might find in something like Star Realms, both of those being very popular deck building games. This is deck building. You're going to start with a fairly standard hand of cards, although you will have a corporation side deck that is unique to you. This is a side deck that you can purchase from that also gives you fairly cheap cards that helps you scale up as you start going through the early rounds of the game until you can more evenly balance out what you're buying from the market, which is a nice little twist. So we all have our own unique corporations to go through. Ultimately, trying to use your units to mine copper, brass, trying to use your units to mine brass, as it's in the title. You're trying to gather more employees and units and buildings to improve your tableau, but there is a degree of fighting your opponent's units. There's an attack strength and defense strength over there of your units, and so you're being mindful of trying to take down your opponent's engine, trying to build up your own engine, trying to ensure that you can get as much of your engine going while mining brass. That's the way you ultimately win, while getting in the way of your opponent or opponents as you go through it, and overall, in all cases, it's pretty fine as far as what it's trying to do. I think for me, it loses in a few small areas. The first is the rulebook was unnecessarily, it was not a good rulebook. In my opinion, this is not a good rulebook. I think the game is very straightforward and very simple. I can teach you the game in 3 minutes, set up in front of the table, pretty easy. The rulebook I thought was very complex relative to how simple the game is, which again, it was easy enough to get through compared to some rulebooks, but relative to how easy the game actually is, I thought it was a bad rulebook. And then the game to me suffers the most from the idea that it kind of feels a little bit like it's trying to do two different things, and it ends up being a little worse at both, while being possibly better in the sum of its parts, but that's not what I'm looking for. Meaning, if I want a tableau building, deck building game, I'll play Dominion. I'll play something where I can just build up my own engine and enjoy that. And if I want to go head to head, I'll feel comfortable playing something like Star Realms and enjoying that process. By trying to merge the two, I think that ultimately I feel like I'm getting not the best of either world when I play Brass Empire. It's fine, it does the job, I enjoy going through it, but ultimately, while it does manage to be a little bit unique in the way it approaches the deck builder space, it didn't end up being best in class in any of the elements that I tried doing, at least not for me. It's a 3 out of 5. And lastly, we have an interesting one, because this is one where I'm going to have a rating, but I want you to pay attention to what I say far, far more than the rating on this one. This is the Strange Forgeries of S.C.Rheber. This S.C.Rheber, I don't actually know how to pronounce it. The Strange Forgeries. This is a fascinating induction game, a game that I have a lot of praise for and a lot of critiques to go through as well. The general idea of the game is you are going through a degree of induction with a dungeon master, so to speak, someone who's enabling the game and moderator for the game, and then the players who are trying to figure out the clues. And this is one of those games where it's all about figuring out the patterns. If you've played games like, I don't know, Picky Pixies, or what else is there in the induction universe? Things and Rings. If you played any game where it's all about trying to figure out the patterns, this is very much a game about figuring out patterns. You see, you're going to have the moderator effectively giving some sort of clue and then literally writing on hundreds of sheets of paper. Well, I mean, there's hundreds in the box. You don't need to write on hundreds. Literally drawing on little sheets of paper some degree of art that fits that clue. And that clue could be anything. The clue could be that your art had 3 circles in it. Exactly 3 circles somewhere. Now, you can do anything you want. You can have 17 circles. You can have no circles. You can have whatever you want, but ultimately, every single thing that you present will either fit the clue or won't fit the clue. It could be 2 circles in a line. It could be an odd number of corners. It could be any number of, however abstract you want to get with the rule. You're going to have a rule in play, and you're going to be putting down pieces of art that match the rule and pieces of art that don't match the rule. It's up to the players to try to figure out if they can slowly but surely figure out what the rule is, and they do so by submitting slips to the moderator, who then confirms secretly whether those match or don't match the rule. So if you see something with a bunch of circles, you might think, oh, the rule is it has circles. And yes, but the rule is it has 3 circles, which means you might want to test things that break or don't break your theory. Submit something with 1 circle, and when it comes back as a negative, you're like, oh wait, I thought the rule was circles, I got a negative on this, what can I do differently? So you're constantly trying to push the limits of your imagination to see if you can figure out not just what the rule appears to be, but what the rule actually is, because in the second half of the game, once you go through all these back and forth steps of the moderator adding more cards, adding more art to the board, and having players test those theories, in the second half of the game, players are going to display what they think is the least obvious paintings in their own little museum, and other players will go around and rank what they think does and doesn't match the rule. Basically, again, going back to the circle thing, if I thought the rule was circles, and I get back that 1 circle and it was wrong, I might put that in my museum, hoping that other players will think that counts, even though it doesn't. So the things that were the most unclear, or the things that threw me off, I'll put them in my museum to throw off the other players. All of this results in an excellent game experience that I thoroughly enjoyed. I've played this several times, both as the moderator, as the players. I've enjoyed this one a lot. It is very, very satisfying. I also think the rulebook is one of the most abysmal rulebooks I have read in a long time. I was taught this game, and it was incredibly complicated for me to figure out how to play the game, even diving into it after it was taught. To be very clear, I knew how to play the game based on my experience. Trying to make my way through the rules and the examples and all of that was a headache. To a certain extent, I almost want to completely ignore the existence of the rules and just go with what I was taught, and then make it up the rest as I go along, because I can certainly do that. Now, I do know, or at least I believe I've heard, that there is a second edition coming at some point. They're trying to clean it up and, in some way presenting a better offering. But for me, I think the Strange Forgeries of S.C.Rheber presents an incredibly good induction game that results in a very satisfying gameplay experience, and yet the overall package is so hard to get through, especially if you are not taught by someone who knows the game, that I think I have to include that in my score. Again, I knew the game and still had to struggle through the rules to understand exactly how to play, even though I already knew. So for me, I am giving this one a 3 out of 5, which is a much lower rating than my actual enjoyment of the game, but I think it is that much of a mess. I think there's a brilliant idea in this game, and it's kind of blocked by a mess, both in terms of the components, in terms of the rules, in terms of the examples, in terms of extra things in the box that you don't even need for gameplay. There's a lot of decks of cards that you don't even need. It's a bit of a mess in the production, but an excellent idea. A 3 out of 5 on the rating, but the enjoyment I have of the enjoyment I have is higher, if that makes sense. And so that's what we have over here. These are your 5 first impressions. We have Cosca coming in at a 3 out of 5. It's fine, nothing particularly great about it. And Nestlings is a 2.5 out of 5. I was pretty bored throughout the experience. Perch was more interesting. I just think there are better games out there, a 3.5 out of 5. Brass, again, was pretty decent, but a little bit too much jack of all trades, master of none, a 3 out of 5. And the strange forgeries of S.C.Rheber, a 3 out of 5, but the actual gameplay is much better than that. But the package is it's a lot of work to get through. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.